Hello everyone, today we are here to help you answer one important question: should you buy Metro Exodus? To start today's question off, we have graphics, sound design, and voice. I was very happy with the graphics here. The zones looked really good. The taiga and the ice zone specifically were beautiful. The desert looked like a desert. I'm sick of seeing deserts in video games, but that's not the graphics' fault. We can't beat up graphics because people are lazy with their level design. However, I did a couple of times run into some very, very heavy FPS drops. I don't know what was causing them. I don't know if that was a hardware or a software issue, but just so you guys are aware, we did have a couple in our playtime that completely stopped our ability to play for a little while each time. But the issue usually resolved itself in less than an hour, usually about 20 minutes. I don't know if that's something that you would necessarily run into, but it's something to keep in your mind. So outside of those FPS issues, the game looks fantastic. It does a great job on selling you on a post-apocalyptic world that people have found ways to live in. That being said, there are spots in the game, in the open world specifically, where I feel like they have tried to put too much in, and you get problems where you'll be walking around the open world and you will run into a spot where you go to walk over something or through something that looks like you should be able to move through, and it will just stop you. This is particularly a problem in the first two settings. The third one doesn't. In the third zone, I didn't have it happen as much. The biggest problem with this is that it really breaks the flow of just being in that open world. It can be really immersion breaking to just be going, and go to walk through some bushes or between a small gap in something, and a rock stops you that doesn't look like it should, or you go to walk through a bush line and one of the brushes just blocks your path entirely. It just feels really bad. So I would like for them to go back through and maybe remove about 2/3 of all the textures in the open world that you can interact with. They do a really good job of selling you on the atmosphere of each zone in this game. The sounds are well made for each area, and there's this fantastic blend of wonder and suspense when you are in some of the areas in these zones that is just fantastic. One particular one that sticks out is the mutated bear when you're trapped by the pioneers and the pirates in the taiga zone. The sounds that are going on are fantastic. The atmosphere is fantastic. It's nice and suspenseful. And then you just have this massive beast lumber over, and you're just like, wow, if this thing messes with me, I am dead. And they have a lot of spots like that throughout the other areas. It's stronger in the smaller contained mission zones than it is in a lot of the open world. But it's not gone from the open level design. It's just less present there than when you're, say, going to collect the map in the Caspian Desert, as opposed to when you're just wandering the desert as a whole. The voice acting in this game can be rough at times. People have been telling me that if you play on with the Russian voiceover, it sounds a lot better because that was the way it was meant to be played, was with the Russian voice actors playing it. But I feel like using that excuse at this point really does a disservice to a lot of the really great English dub voice actors that are out there. And I can't help but feel like we are in an anime fan's room arguing about subs versus dubs on anime, and we shouldn't have to be doing that about a video game that is the third in a trilogy at this point. You guys should have worked this out by now. But if you can suffer through having the subs running with the Russian voice actors talking, people have said it sounds really good. I don't care enough about bad voice actors to do that because I like to understand what's being said as well as read. So your mileage on that particular issue may vary. So worry about that one at your own discretion, I guess. Next up, we have the gameplay and story. The gameplay loop here is very well made. The weapons all feel amazing to use, whether it's your Kalash or your more meek Takar. They all sound great and serve very well-designed purposes. As an aside for that, the Takar with exploding fire pellets is some of the most fun you will ever have in this game. Just pelting somebody from long range and watching them burn to death and scream is glorious. The weapon variety in here is a mixed bag. I find that it's still too lacking a lot of the time, except now you don't have to purchase guns. You just unlock them as you find them, and then you can switch to whatever you want whenever you feel like from your train. So I feel like there's a good enough blend for what content's here, but I would like to see them add more guns in the future, because as is, you essentially have just a couple of the same weapons that don't really differentiate too much. So you end up finding two that you like, and you really never move from those two. So there's really no experimentation with the weapons here in terms of just picking up random stuff on the field, which is, I feel, kind of a missed opportunity in this game. But as I said, you don't feel it so much because you can switch it whenever, and you don't have to buy new ones every time you want to change. So it kind of evens out in the long run. The stealth here, I feel, took a really big hit in the change to open level design. There are times when you're in the open area and you're trying to sneak into a camp to silently take people out, and you'll get stuck right before you get to them because of something weird in the geometry that it looks like they just put there for no reason. Some other issues with this is it can be hard in these open areas to really tell what path people will take to scout. A real problem of this happens in the first zone. There's a couple of areas where it looks like they shouldn't be going there, and then all of a sudden they'll wind up there, and you're just like, how could you have known that I was over here unless you just magicked your way into this because of random pathing. So it feels cheap at times. However, all of that goes away when you go back into the more linear mission designed areas. The stealth in those spots still feels absolutely fantastic, which is why it sucks so much that it suffers so bad out in the open level design. The story here was pretty good for the most part. It does a really good job of not showing its hand too early, I think, of what your penultimate goal is going to be. So you start out, you're kind of like, okay, this is kind of hinting at we're leaving. When's the shoe for what our end goal is going to be when it drops? And then kind of thinking, okay, so here's our end goal, but then that gets resolved, and you're like, okay, here's our next end goal. And it does a good job of being like, here's a goal, but we're not going to tell you why you're here yet, kind of until you're later on, and then you start to be like, okay, I see the finish line, I just don't know how we're going to get there quite yet. And it's nice that they kind of, I don't want to say they piecemeal it, because I think that does a disservice to what they're doing as a whole. But it's nice that for some of the earlier missions, you're kind of like, okay, when does the shoe drop that tells me why we're really here and what we're really doing? And it feels kind of nice to not just have this looming deadline over you at all times that you know for a fact is going to come eventually. So as for the characters, I actually think they did a really good job on all of the characters on here. There were a couple who felt extraneous, like the driver of the train. I felt like he was just there to be a person who knew how to drive a train for you, and his character felt kind of blasé. Just like the girl and her daughter who you pick up in the first zone. I really feel like they didn't contribute anything to her character to make her a interesting person. However, they did a pretty good job on most of the other characters. They're all pretty routine characters that we've seen at this point. We have the gung-ho person who never gets to have his time in the spotlight, the gun crazy crafter who babies all the armor of everyone because he's the mother of the group. We of course have the loudmouthed leader. So all of their character designs are, everybody on the group is a character of something that we have seen thousands of times before, but they all came across as likable, and I think that's important whenever you're doing caricatures of just baseline personalities. As long as they're not annoying, it's fine. And I didn't really find any of them annoying enough to be offensive. So one thing that I wish we had gotten away from in any of these games up to this point is having Artyom be a silent protagonist in game, but have him talk in loading screens. It's really jarring whenever people, because the studio wanted to be tongue-in-cheek and fourth wall breaky, when people acknowledge the fact that your character isn't talking in very dangerous situations. There is a scene in particular with some cannibals where they directly are like, why can't you two be like this young gentleman who just stays quiet while the wise people talk? And I'm like, that's funny and all, but that really doesn't let you get away from the fact that Artyom should be talking when these people are potentially about to kill his father-in-law and his wife. He should be screaming. He should be doing something other than just sitting there silently. And I feel like this game, more than others, really lost its footing on the silent protagonist spot, because it's specifically because they went out of their way to draw attention to it. And it would have made more sense for him to have talked in this one than any others, because he just had his entire belief of the world destroyed in this game. At some point you would expect him to talk. So to round this whole thing off, I want to talk about the crafting system in this game. I liked parts of it, and other parts of it felt very tacked on. So I want to talk about the good in the crafting first, because I feel like it's important to note that I think there's more good that came from this design than bad. I like that you can do crafting for stuff like med kits and weapon attachments on the fly. It's really nice to kind of have control over that whole system. It's nice to pick up a part and be like, immediately, hey, I want to go equip this, or I want to take this off and rearrange some attachments, or I have a sniping mission coming up, so I need to throw all that on. It's nice to have that kind of control on the fly, so I like that. But crafting tables, which are in specific locations, you can craft ammo, you can clean your guns, you can upgrade your body armor, your gas mask, and this, that, and the third. So parts of that system that I like is ammo crafting, even though it makes the game feel less of a survival and more of a shooter. I like it specifically because I think they wanted it to be less of a survival game. I like that you can make your gas mask better. It gives you something tangible that's actually unbelievably useful at times. And I like the body armor because it lets you prioritize maybe carrying more ammo or carrying more med kits. It's nice to have kind of like something that alters your gameplay in a way that isn't necessarily just more damage overall. or more damage outright, I should say. Unfortunately, it's at these tables where I also run into my first major complaint with the crafting system, and it's the gun cleaning in this game. The gun cleaning feels tacked on and pointless. It feels just awful to be playing through and get to a point where your gun is just jamming every other shot because you haven't cleaned it yet, or because you haven't stopped somewhere to clean it. And it feels like it's just there to burn the liquid crafting material out of your inventory so that you're not constantly carrying a bunch of it and you still end up with a bunch of it. And so the other problem with crafting comes from how many of these benches you run into in any given zone. So if these were just like you need to strategically plan going somewhere around the fact that you might not be at a bench for a while was their goal, I think I could stomach it more. But there are a ton of these benches in every area. So you're not like, oh, I need to clean this gun before I go trek halfway across the map, or by the time I get to where I'm going, it'll be jammed. No, you're just like, who cares if it jams halfway there? There's probably going to be one close to or at the location I'm going. Which, for most of the time that you're using guns primarily, was the case. The only time it wasn't was at the start of the taiga zone, which you've lost your guns and you're using a crossbow anyway, and it only fires one round, so jamming isn't an issue. So it kind of is a self-defeating prophecy with this thing. I probably would have liked the mechanic more if it didn't feel like such a pointless, just, I'm here in the background, have fun with me. If I actually had to think about the mechanic, I probably wouldn't hate it as much as I do. But given the overabundance of these tables, for the most part, I just ignored it till it annoyed me. Then I looked around for 5 seconds and I usually found a table close by. So I felt that was pretty problematic and kind of annoying. The other nice part about the crafting table that isn't really specific to crafting is that they removed buying guns from the game. You just, whenever you pick up a new gun, you unlock it at your train's main table, and you can pick it whenever, which is a nice change. It feels a lot more lax that you can just do this and you can play around more with weapons. So to wrap up this whole thing, do I recommend you purchase Metro Exodus? Absolutely. I have problems with this game that hold it down, kind of in a big way, but the fun of playing the game outweighs a lot of those hang-ups. The story is worth being there for, a lot of the characters are worth being there for, the gunplay is worth being there for, and the stealth is worth being there for. So if nothing else, the annoyances don't make the core of this game less fun when you're in the heat of the moment experiencing them. It just makes the downtime in between more annoying, which is problematic, and I hope they can work on in the future. But I feel the experience is 100% worth your time and the asking price to experience it, and it absolutely, in my opinion, holds up to the previous two in the series. Well, thank you all for stopping by. I hope to catch you in the next video. Peace.